and welcome to Parting the Clouds. My name is Annette Hegner, and we shed the light on the darkness of emotional bondage through real-life testimonials. Hi, and welcome to the show today. I am excited for you guys to meet Lisa Crawford. Her and I met through a divine appointment just a couple of weeks ago, and through a conversation, found out that she has an amazing story to tell. And I am so just happy that she was able to make it here with us today. So, Lisa Crawford is a motivational speaker and author of Silent Screams, which is this book here. And we'll tell you more about it and where to get it at the end. And she founded LJC Motivations. Their focus is to speak to the root of your pain and to motivate people to reach the best version of themselves. So I was able to read this book over the weekend, and I will say that it is quite a story. It grips you. There's many smaller stories within this book, and they all have some truth to some things that happened in her life. So there's a short poem at the beginning that I want to read to you that she wrote, and then I will have her take it from there. So it's called The Freedom in My Pen. I write to free myself of words and questions that are locked down in my mind and soul. I write to tell the world what I feel, be it good or bad. I write to express thoughts of love, joy, loneliness, anticipation, and longing. I write to say words that may make me cry or lose a grip on what I would like to say verbally. I write to share thoughts of love and contentment to a loved one. During this period in my life, I write to keep my inner being healthy and alert, but mainly I write to keep my sanity. From LJ Crawford. So welcome, Lisa. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you. This is so awesome that we are in this space right now. Who would have thought that just saying hello to you would lead us to be here? I'm so excited.
Me too. Me too. So tell us about your book, Silent Screams, and what prompted you to write this.
So, most of my life, I have been a person that was a people pleaser. Even as a child, I wanted people to be okay. I wanted people to like me. And when you're a people pleaser on the outside, you tend to have silent screams on the inside. So I learned at a very early age how to mask my true feelings and be the person on the outside that people wanted to be around, whether it was good or bad, whether they had my best intention at heart or not, and just hold in what was bothering me. One thing I can say is that even as a kid, my mom, she was the oldest girl of 10 children. So I knew that this lady never had a break. I mean, I knew this early on. And then she had kids, one that's 16. Her life of kids happened very early. And so by the time it got to me, I knew that she needed a break. She needed a kid that was not giving her any kind of problem, any kind of grief. So I wanted to be that person for her. But in doing that, I lost me. So Silent Screams, I wrote that poem, The Freedom in My Pen. I wrote that poem when I was 28 years old. And I didn't write this book until I was 49 years old. So I feel like throughout that entire time of my life, I held on to so much. I had to get it out because I was screaming like a crazy person every day, all day on the inside. But I was like this. Hello, my name is Lisa Crawford. How are you? How can I assist you today? So that's a hard spot to be in. And there's a lot of people in that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how on the front of the book it says releasing the pain of life experiences through the healing power of the written word. So, and that's the whole premise of this podcast is for people to be able to tell their story, take the painful experiences that they went through, and then to share their testimony. Because there's so many people stuck in a similar situation and they just don't know where to turn. They feel alone. So it really helps when there's people like you that are willing to share your story. So again, I just thank you because after reading it, there's so much in there. There's so much vulnerability and so much pain that you have walked through. I would say more than most people that I know. But you and how I met you, I mean, you're just so full of light and life that I was drawn to you. And within probably what, 10 minutes,
Yeah.
somehow our conversation turned to God,
Amen.
and we were in a very secular public place, and it wasn't really the setting for that, but God works in mysterious ways. So through the twists and turns of that short conversation, we ended up figuring out that you would be a great guest to have on the show. But starting with the story of when you were a child, would you like to start there?
Sure.
The very first story in the book?
So I was a very spoiled little girl. I was the baby of six kids, and I'm the seventh child. And my brothers, they loved me. They took care of me. That I remember, one brother in particular, I really remember him a lot, and I call him my brother dad. And then I have a sister who was there, and she was very good to me. But my problem began when I went outside my house. I was
Mm,
protected at home, but by me having that understanding for my mom, if she wanted to go somewhere with her friends, she may leave me at her friend's house. And now I want to do this too, because make this disclaimer. If there's a problem with a person, a child, and they don't tell anybody and they hold that mask in, how's a parent going to know? How's anybody going to know? You're
mm,
suffering in silence by yourself for no reason because you're afraid to share that. And people be like, "Oh well, you should have been able to tell your mom," but I knew her. You didn't. She had so much going on her plate all the time that I didn't want to bother her. And that's one thing about me. I went through my childhood not wanting to bother people and
mm,
and ruffle feathers. So if one time I was left over at a friend's house while she went somewhere with the other grandmother, the grandmother, and when she left, there were two girls there, but there were a bunch of boys there at that time. So the girls left, and I was there watching TV. And next thing I know, the younger boys was like on me with their clothes on, just on top of me. And I'm just like, I'm a kid. I really didn't understand what was happening to me, but it was happening. And I was no, actual skin to skin, but they were on me, and it looked like an act. And I left
mm,
from that situation and went to a cousin who stayed in my face and on me most of my single digit life. And it
mm,
was very, very disheartening for me because everybody praised this person because they went to church, they did this, they did that. And me, I was called fast because I did not want to go to church. I didn't want to go where they were because I figured where they were, it couldn't be a good place. And then I also I held back a lot of things at that time because even though that person was constantly being praised and everything, they were being praised. I had to sit there with all of my silent screams as a child, 7, 8 years old, and just let them be great when they were terrible. And I was called fast because I was smart. And when I corrected somebody, you don't mean no good. You just too grown. But I was right. I was smart. So I had to deal with the verbiage. I had to deal with the acts, the attacks, everything from even a child with other children to a teenager to grown men touching me because I was a chunky little girl. So I already was developed at 8, 9 years old.
mm.
And it was just like my father passed away. So to have grown men who were supposed to be a protector touch me like I was a grown woman, I, what was I supposed to do with that? But I held it in, and I
Yeah.
was smiled and act like everything was all right.
And what was the phrase that you said was said in your home life that basically about not hurting others outside of the house that made you feel like you couldn't speak about it?
Whatever goes on in this house, stay in this house. But where your feet land, that's the house. So it didn't matter whether it was my four walls
Mm,
or excuse me, or somewhere else. If it happened to me in the family, that was the wall. Whatever goes on in that house, you
yeah.
keep it in that house.
So basically, it stays in the family. You
It
don't share
stays
it.
in.
You don't
Right.
shame anybody. You don't.
You don't shame anybody, no matter what you've been through.
Right. That okay. Which is so unhealthy. And unfortunately, that's a motto a lot of families stand by because they just don't want the shame of the story getting out and what are other people going to think. And
Right.
it's so unfortunate.
It really is.
Really sad.
It really is.
Yeah. Okay. So then from that point on, then what happened?
So, of course, after you get teenager and people are still with you and messing with you, I had to make up my mind, I'm gonna stay a virgin, complete virgin until I get married. And with that, I was 16 years old, ended up getting raped there by a friend, a brother of a friend, and then raped on my graduation night.
Mm,
I'm like, I thought something was wrong with me. But as I grew from that, I learned that a predator can sniff out prey. And I clearly was prey
right.
because I never ever learned how to deal with it. So that vulnerability and that what's the word? That naive mind and naive act, demeanor set me up for to be chased and to be hunted.
Yeah. It's just awful. I'm sorry. So
So
from what did you learn like from that experience though? Did you develop like kind of a hatred towards men and um wanting to get back at them? Is that something that I thought you had mentioned?
so that was something that was really strange for me, is that I didn't hate them. I turned all of that towards me
Hmm.
and tried to figure out what was wrong with me. But I also, some women, if they get raped, then they are either promiscuous or they turn into themselves. And, they're lonely and they're inside themselves, introvert.
Hmm.
Me, I kept moving in my same flow, laughing, having a good time and stuff. But I turned into a person, a woman, a girl, actually, that just had no feelings. I had no emotion whatsoever. And so if I was with somebody and it went there, even if they were a nice person, I just disregarded them like it didn't matter because that's how I felt. Like I didn't matter. And that part of me, you know, if the young girls these days could understand that you are a gift and you need to preserve that gift for somebody who is willing to marry you and be with you and hold on to you and protect you. That sounds like a fantasy, but that's power to me to be able to say, this is mine, I choose. You don't choose. And so when with that being gone from me, I was just kind of like, what do I have? And then the worst part about it, this is where God's glory come from this story. Um, when I was 16, that rape, I thought that I was pregnant. So, because I didn't tell anybody for months. And so I finally got to the doctor, and the man said, "Do you want the lady to come in?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you got a lot of stuff going on, first of all." He said, "And you're not going to be able to have kids." I was 16. And so I was like, oh, okay. So with that in my mind, 16, 17, 18, I'm thinking, who cares? I'm going to live in Manhattan, be on Broadway, and drive a Mercedes coupe and live in the brownstone. I had it all figured out in my brain. But I ended up getting married at 22. And the reason, and I'm not bashing this guy, my ex-husband, because he was a blessing to me for this purpose. I got married. I got pregnant like immediately. So I was very thankful because I internally and silently wanted kids. So to put on that bold face and say, it don't matter, I don't care. I was hurting from that too. So
Yeah.
I ended up having one kid and I had another kid and then I got divorced. So all of that shows that man can say what he want to say, but when it's meant for you and it's in your DNA to be a mother and it's a divine purpose for you to be a parent, man can't do nothing with that.
Yeah. That's good. And that's a great reminder because so many times the doctors will tell you something and that you'll latch onto that and believe it, but God has the final say. So even though it looks impossible in the natural, that's when you would go to God and just obviously tell him what your desires are. And if it's his will, then yes, he will make that happen. And so I'm so happy you were able to have two children and yeah, and now even grandchildren. So it's amazing.
It made me giggle.
Okay, so going on from there, so you have the two children, and then what happens next?
So with the kids, I got divorced when my kids were 2 and 3 actually. And it wasn't the cheating, it wasn't any of that stuff being poor. I didn't like that at all because I came from, like I said earlier, I was well taken care of as a child. I have no problems about my home life inside those walls life. Um, but I learned what it meant to not have. And I think that in the midst of hardships, we have to also hindsight look back. I look back at it, and I'm glad I went through those hard things because it made me a whole woman, very whole. Because now I know both sides of having and not having. Then I had those kids, and his behavior was horrible. But when we were friends, we were the best of friends. But one day, I heard him scream at my 3-year-old son, and I said, "Oh, we're not doing that." So I left. I went to the divorce attorney on a welfare check. You're not going to holler at my little gifts. And so, because I heard that voice, and one thing somebody told me, said, well, why don't you just stay for the kids? I'm like, no, I hate that word. I'm leaving for the kids
Mm,
because who would I be if I allowed them to see him mentally abuse me consistently and then trickle that down to them? I wasn't happy. They were my gifts. So after all of that, got divorced, I actually became a preacher. And
you
I was doing
did.
I was the
I didn't
evangelist.
know that.
I was an evangelist for 13 years and working, traveling evangelist. Me and those kids was everywhere. And so that was awesome. And no, when I say I was evangelist, I was in the holiness church. No sex. I was divorced. No sex. No drinking. No nothing. Nothing but church, kids, and work. That was it in that order. In school. So I was so thankful for that experience because when I speak to women's groups and speak to young girls who feel like they just can't do without something, yes, you can, because I'm a living witness that you can. So
Yeah.
I just been I have lived and tried to help and give back to people the things that I felt like I didn't get. I try to give that to the youth, a listening ear, a soothing tone, and some ideas. Not telling them what to do, but ideas if they ask me.
Um, okay, so when you were doing the traveling evangelism, you ran across some things in the church that were not on the up and up from our conversation. So, can you share a little bit about that and how it is a thing that people need to be aware of and be on guard, and how the enemy can show up anywhere, and to just really be mindful too, and not to always just trust what's on the forefront. So,
Right.
to really use discernment and ask God, if certain people are safe. So, can you share a little bit about that?
So in the church, to me, from the things that I've seen and I saw during that time was that I am so sorry. I am so sorry. One moment, please. I'm so sorry. One second. I'm so sorry. So one thing I did learn in the church is that there was so much judgment.
Mm,
And in my opinion, from the things that I saw, you can't have and bring somebody to the Lord if you're going to judge them about everything. You help them with the word, help them, show them from your actions, show them from your heart and your love how things should be. But the judgment that was in the church and the religious part of it, it just destroys the people.
yeah.
And so I had to deal with a lot of that. And it wasn't easy. It did not take me away from the church, but I had to be the buffer between some of that and helping the young people see that God is still God. This is man. God is God. So some of the church hurt, as they say, some people use that term, church
Hmm.
hurt. I had some of that, and it wasn't cool at
Yeah.
all.
I mean, a lot of people have church hurt, and then they react by just leaving the church, and
Yes,
that's the problem. Like,
that's the problem.
they forget man has free will and that they are fallen and that everybody, sins and does things that are wrong. So to just completely leave the church and blame it on God and say the church as a whole is bad is not the way to go. That's a
It's
trap
not.
of the enemy, because you need fellowship and you need to
Mm,
be with like-minded believers to hold you up in prayer and get you through the hard season. So his plan is to isolate, and with that church hurt, people just are turned off to God and church. They
right.
blame him, and then they just go on their own way, and then they're easier prey for the
Amen.
enemy's plans. So I'm glad you
That
stuck
is
it out.
that is so perfectly said. Perfectly said.
Thank you. Okay, so anything else you want to share from that period in your life?
So, you know, I learned one thing I did learn for sure. I had a standard and a foundation, and I was thankful for that. But when I could see how the titles of people just clouded their mind, I had one person, a mother actually in the church, who was livid with me because I didn't call the evangelist, and in her name, I said the beautiful. So after church, there was a whole meeting, and she took over the meeting, and she thought that I was disrespectful. And I'm like, it's those little things right there, those little crabs that pull people away from God. And when you see people act one way on Sunday and in the pulpit, and then they have a whole different demeanor of jealousy, hatred, and you see that, how is a young believer going to get their footing? you know? And so that's something that I deal with. I really help the young people, to understand that God is God wherever you are. If you are not in the building and you have a group of friends that you want to pray with and you want to talk about the goodness of the Lord, do that, but stay with the people. Stay with the
Yeah.
people. Don't just leave him and try to do it on your own, because it's harder to stay focused. So during my time, that's some of the things that I really, really worked on. And it was hard. That was a hard journey, but I'm glad I went through that.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the chapters, you talk about your addiction with alcohol. Would you like to elaborate on that? Because well, and also I would say, like, all of the stories in here, if you could explain that really quickly, that they are pieces of things that actually happened to you, but
Right.
they're changed, um, obviously,
Exactly.
to protect identities and to just like get the point across of the message that you wanted to convey.
Exactly. So that's what I did it that way, because I wanted the stories to be not, they are hard, but the reality of them were harder. So I wanted to take pieces of them. And I'm the main character in each one of those, whether it's a boy or whatever, I'm the main character in them. And I just pulled from different tragedies, different joys, different heartaches, and just combined them into different stories. So that's where that this book came from. And as far as the alcoholism is concerned, after I got divorced, um, I was a silent, what they call it, a functioning alcoholic. And
Mm.
before I got divorced, let me tell you something. The day that I went to that church, my neighbor, who sings like a mockingbird, her name's Felicia, she came, I said, "Where are you going every day?" And she said, "I'm going to church." I said, "Why you go to church every single blessed day?" She said, "We having a revival." And I'm like, "A revival?" She said, "Yeah." So now I had been to church before, but it wasn't like that, what she was doing. So I said, "I'm gonna go with you on Sunday." And so I did. And I remember having a drink before I went to church. I remember that. And I sat on the back pew, and the pastor, she was a big 6'2" black woman with all white on. That's what the Holiness Church was. And she came back there and she waved. She wore this long like mantle, and she waved that thing over my head, and I passed out on that pew for the rest of church. I don't even know what happened to me. So
What?
I, I was like, okay. I woke up and she said, "Girl, you got slayed in the spirit." I'm like, "You sure I didn't just go to sleep?" She said, "No, you didn't."
Oh
So
my gosh.
that was an experience. But after that, I started moving up and I started wanting to go. Then I started taking my kids, and it was just like a process. And then next thing you know, she was like, "You gonna quit pew," what she called me, the pew preacher. She said, "You go quit pew preaching in this church and you go answer the calling of the Lord." So, but I was, even with that, it took me a long time before I even got to that point. But all while I was going, I was still drinking. And
Wow.
so during that 13 years, though, I quit drinking, and it was like 1990, 1998, all the way up to 2012. Yeah, 2012, 2013. And I was amazed at myself. I was very proud of myself. It was hard. It was so hard. And but I did it. And then, when you're in certain industries, like the hospitality industry, we're always entertaining. We're always doing stuff, and so it was easy. "Here, Lisa, here's your little glass of wine." And at that time, I wasn't around anyone that would say that lady had died, so I wasn't getting that phone call all the time. Um, Make sure you stay true to you, and all that rah rah she gave me. I didn't have that, and I held on to her for a long time. But she died like in before I even had grandkids, so I did that pretty much by myself after she passed away. But at the end of it, it just started out little. Then it kept growing and kept growing. And then next thing you know, in 2019, when I wrote this book in 16, but I was writing another book in 19, and I was having the worst bout of it. I was out working actually, but I didn't do that while I was working. I was just in my room.
Mm.
And I was so sad all the time. And I remember my father died in the process too, 2015. And one day, I was crying in my sleep. I heard it. And I opened my eyes, and my dad was sitting at the foot of my bed. And he said, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "I need you to get it together. Get it together." And I sat there like I was leaning actually on his shoulder, and he helped me get through that. So,
Oh, wait, so you're speaking about your dad that had passed?
mhm,
You saw him at the foot of your bed?
at the foot of my bed, he
Okay, I
always
just wanna make sure I'm hearing that right.
he had this beautiful white hair, and he always wore a white shirt with black suspenders and blue jeans. That's his outfit during the week. And
Yeah.
I opened my eyes, and he just sitting there. And I was like, he said, "Well," he looked at me, he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I was crying so hard. And it's like I went and sat at the foot of the bed up against the wall. And I promise you, it felt like I was leaning on his shoulder. And from that time on, I kind of started pulling back and pulling back and pulling back. But it's an uphill battle when
Mm.
you're facing that. And that's why I empathize with people who have that in their life, alcohol and substance abuse, because it rides you,
Yeah.
but you have to have the ability to know when is when. And so
Okay.
that's
So
what,
I want to ask you about the thing with your dad one more time
Mhm,
because I had this conversation over the weekend with somebody else because, it says biblically to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
mhm,
But your experience, and I had a similar experience after my stepfather passed, that I saw him come in to a room and I felt him put his arm around me and I saw him hold my mother's hand. So I don't know how to explain that because they say, well, if that's a familiar spirit. Some Christians will say that it's demonic presence masquerading as the person that you love. However, that was more comforting than anything, and it was just fleeting, and it's not like I saw him in his entirety. It's like he was more translucent
mhm.
than anything else. So how would you explain that?
I thought that too with people because I'm gonna go back to my pastor. When she passed away,
Mhm.
I was in the room. I just missed her, just like that. And she passed away, and I was looking up in the corner of the room, and I saw this like this. It was just like robes of just you could see through it like smoke almost.
Mm.
And I was looking at these apostles and bishops in the room, and I'm like, y'all don't see that? And they looking up like, what? But she let me see her because I missed her. And then
Mm.
when I turned back, she was gone. And so I knew that it was real at that point. But so when I saw my dad at the foot of that bed, I I was so at ease and so peaceful about it. And so when I mentioned this to one of the church people, excuse me, they were like, that's just your imagination.
Mm.
That's not of God. I'm like, but that was my dad.
Yeah.
What if it's not of God, why would it come and comfort me? If it was of the devil, how come it didn't say something to take me down further? That's my mindset.
I kind of agree, and that's just one of those things that maybe we'll never know the
We'll
answer
never
to
know.
on this side of heaven, but I find it interesting because, yes, the Bible says that, but then these other things happen that are hard to explain, um, and you're right, it was just a comforting thing, and it was almost just like a, "I'm okay" type of thing, and then that was it. There was never any other visitation or anything else trying to, like, lead us astray or down the wrong
Yeah,
path, like you're saying, so I don't know.
I don't
So
know.
I'm on a quest to ask people this question when they have
I
that
love that because I want to know, sis.
yeah, when I find out, I'll let you know. Gosh. Okay, so moving on, I guess, after you were,
After
delivered from the alcoholism, and then what happened in your life?
so, I had that book signing,
Mhm,
and the first time it didn't make it in the Barnes and Noble, but the second time it did. But um, in between there, and I laugh at this because I gave the speech on being assaulted, knowing that I've been assaulted and touched from 7 years old, and then raped twice. And I was like, okay, I don't hate these people because their problem. They try to make it my problem, but I'm not going to receive it, even though I'm damaged. I felt that way.
yeah.
So I gave the speech, wrote the book, did the seminar, and it happened to me again at 52. And I was like, what? That was so baffling to me.
Wait a minute, what happened again at 52? You were raped again?
I was.
No.
I didn't share that, but I was.
Oh my
And it was
gosh.
like what one thing about that one was that it was like I was separated from my body and I was able to look down at it. And this person was out of their mind. They called that person on the bed their mom. They talked about their sister. They talked about all these different things. And I'm like looking down at that and I'm just thinking, what's happening again? But it wasn't in my mind, it wasn't happening to me because I was looking down at it. So I had separated myself from that.
Wow,
So
that's incredible.
it I'm very cautious and about everything now. I'm on high alert most of the time now. And I really don't have a lot of words on that one. I really don't. Because I just don't.
Gosh, I'm so sorry. That's I don't even know what to say about that. You
You
kinda
know,
hit me in
sometimes
left field.
so much drama and so much
Yeah,
pain and stuff you go through, and as much as I want a relationship and want to know love, the rebuilding of that shattered heart, it's like at one point I told somebody in a seminar, I said, if my heart was made of glass, it would be dust.
mm,
Because why do some of this stuff? But you know why it happened, hindsight at 56 years old? Because it was at disappointed time that I could say this to somebody and they can say, I'm not by myself. That matters to me.
yeah, yeah. Wow, my goodness. So and how old are you now?
56.
Oh, you're 56, and this happened at 52.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
My
but you
gosh.
know, I count it all joy because I have no choice. I have no choice but to look at that. And then when I'm able to interject myself into somebody's conversation and they talking about something that sound like, oh Lord, what was me? I'm like, girl, let me tell you something. And I'm able to share that story or those stories or a story. And they look at me and they like, well, why you look like that? Why you sound like that? I said, my story is for God's glory.
Yeah.
Period. That's
Wow.
it. That's the only way I can look at it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only way to look at it and to be sane and
Amen.
to make a difference because you could
Yes.
completely go the other way because there's just I don't know what the explanation is, but to happen to you that many times is just awful. So for you to be able to stand strong and still be, you know, praising God and living through it and sharing your testimony, I mean, you are just incredible. So,
Man.
wow.
I did a program at this high school called Queen's Court.
Mhm.
And the idea from the pastor was to um, go into the senior classrooms and teach these young ladies how to be queens. So
Hmm.
they're used to people coming in and doing this spiel and stuff and not really sharing. They're being very diplomatic in their speech and all this stuff. So I came in and they was like, oh, another one. I'm like, so what y'all want to talk about? Said, we don't want to be no queen in this class, and all this stuff. So I'm like, okay. So I had to go deep on them, ask them some questions and see who would answer me truthfully. And one girl I asked, I said, how many of y'all have been in an uncomfortable position with another person, without asking them anything. And so
Right.
they said, I saw one or two girls raising hands. And then by the end of the class, that first class, I had went ahead and told them a bunch of things about me. And at the end of the class, I had 8 girls. Mind you, there were only 12 people in that class, including me. And all of us had 8 people out that 12 had an experience.
Mm.
So before you can teach somebody how to be a queen, we got to clean out the stuff that's in them that's blocking them. Like even me right now, I'm a speaker and do this and try to help everybody else. I have my own stuff that I sabotage myself. So I have to work on me all the time, you know? So that's one thing from all the things that I've experienced is that I have to stay aware of what I'm doing and don't give myself a whole lot of passes. I don't. But sometimes I just be tired. And I know there are people out there who are just tired. But you can't be tired and still all the time. Be tired, but do something towards your goals. And that helps you with those silent screams when you are moving forward, doing something towards where you want to be. It helps. It helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, you left me kind of speechless with that with that last one. So, is there anything else from the book that you want to highlight before we finish?
So I just want to encourage people, if you've ever, let me say this. I've looked on LinkedIn the other day and it said, if you have ever experienced any kind of bad situation or trauma or anything like that, and you overcame it, you're an expert. So to this audience, I would like to say, don't look at the bad things and live there. Don't stay stagnant there, because some of those bad things can turn around and be something great. So I had a boss one time and he was terrible and I allowed him to treat me terrible and it was just awful for me. I was like some dolphins and some butterflies, baby dolphins, and I was happy all the time, but I let this person just almost destroy me. And hindsight from that, I ended up having a platform to where I'm able to talk to Disrupt HR, about how leaders should treat their employees. So that's just an example of how I took all those years of mistreatment from him and things that I allowed to happen to me under his tutelage and turned it into something to help somebody else not feel that way and get trapped within themselves of feeling like they're unworthy, their skill doesn't matter, and all those things that I felt. So
Hmm.
as you go on through life and go tomorrow, if there's something that you have always wanted to do, just start small. If it's a silent scream inside of you, acknowledge it. That was part of my problem. I stumped down so much stuff, just stumped it down. I'm like, you know what? I'll deal with it another day. And I never dealt with it. I should have went to therapy, honest to goodness. I should have went to therapy, but I didn't.
Um,
And there's nothing wrong with therapy, because silent screams can take you into suicide. And that is something that I have experienced with some of my people that I'm very close to. And it broke my heart that they didn't feel comfortable to say, hey, I need help. So that is why I chose that title, Silent Screams, because when you screaming on the inside, your actions could take a life. Your actions could take your own life, or you can get so mad to where you take somebody else's life. You got to settle yourself. Put it on paper. Write down how you feel. So that is one thing that I really really want people to do, is to let me speak to that pain, the root of the pain. When you speak to the root, it's got to clean out. You can prune it and you can make it do some things so they can become the best version of themselves.
hmm. And how do you work with people through LJC motivations to accomplish that, since that is, the focus of that
So
company?
I do a lot of podcasts. You know what? I love the stage. I do. But I get a lot of requests to be on podcasts, and I love it. So I'm going to get my own podcast, and I'm going to have my sister here on my podcast. But that's something that I love, because I feel that it's like having a conversation with people, and they can go back and listen to it if they choose to, and if they feel it. Like if you go to a seminar and you writing everything down, I love the stage and I love training. But if you writing everything down, how many of you all could say, hey, I got that book from 2015. I went to that fire seminar with Les Brown, and that tablet's still in my closet. I haven't implemented anything. I think that you can get more from podcasts sometimes, because it's just right there and you can go back and re-listen to it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then another thing, everybody that I step to, whoever I'm eye to eye with, that's my assignment. You don't have to have the title leader on your head. When I go all these different hotels and stuff, people come to me and they tell me things, but I take the time with the person that I'm looking at right then and listen to them. Sometimes they're whining, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they don't have nothing to do with the job, but they need help with one thing here, they'll want a silent scream before they can do their job effectively. And I'm there to do it. I'm there to help that.
Yeah. which was the environment I met you in. So I don't know,
I
but
don't know. And I felt so bad. I left all my little babies there and they didn't know I was leaving. It's just now you talking about something that broke my heart. That did. It broke
yeah,
my heart because it was so unexpected. And I've never had that happen to me before where I'm getting ready to fly out and they said, oh, they changed their mind. You're not coming back. So
yeah,
that it just for me it left a lot of untied things because I was going to work with some of the kids on getting a LinkedIn profile together. I was going to help one little girl do a purpose discovery because she said I want to do more, I want to be more. I had some things in place, but it is what it is. I still have their phone number, so I'm still going to follow through on some of that stuff.
oh, good, good. Yeah. So, and like you said, she was on temporary assignment at a certain property, and that's how I got the chance to meet her. And 2 days later, she was called to, close that assignment unexpectedly. So, um, it definitely was a God connection that we got to meet when we did, just in time before you left, or we would have completely missed it. So,
I'm so
yeah.
excited about that.
I know. So, tell people where they can buy your book, Silent Screams, and if there's a way to contact you.
Absolutely. My website is lisajcrawford.com. And on that website, I have all my links to the Amazon links are there under books. And all of my social media is there. It's just easier that way. www.lisajcrawford.com. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. On there, everything. So I always do a message on YouTube. I have a message called Motivational Moments with LJ. And so I have uploaded some shorts and some videos on there, some of my podcasts on there. I just want to be available to help. If you send me a text, an email or something, I'm going to answer it.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's so important. So I will put all of those links too and on this YouTube video in the comments so
Mhm.
people can have easy access to that as
Okay.
well.
Oh,
So,
one more little thing.
oh,
So
please.
I did write a book on online dating called The Adventures of Online Dating with Lolo. So
You
that's out there.
did.
It's out there too. And it's just some funny stories about things that I experienced over the years on online dating. And the cutest part of it is at the cover of the book, I met this guy and online on Plenty of Fish. And I said, what do you do? He said, I'm an artist. And I said, oh, I said, so how about we flip this? Because I need somebody to do the cover of my book. And so he ended up being uh, a vendor for me. It was pretty cute.
Wow. You never know who you're going to meet,
You
even
never
on
know.
Plenty of Fish.
You never know.
Okay. So, is there anything else you want to share before we close?
I just want to encourage everybody to pay attention to yourself. If you need to scream a little bit, you need to sit to yourself a little bit. If you need to read, be by yourself for a moment, at least 30 minutes if you can, and just relax your mind, relax yourself. Because I have the tendency, one of my downfalls is that I will go, 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 and I'm tired or my mind is tired. Sometimes when I'm sitting, my mind is just like a Ferris wheel. We have got to learn how to relax in this time right here because we're faced with all these things on social media, all these things on the TV, all this negativity and all this evil happening. We have to settle ourselves so that we can be a light. One of the people that I work for, he said, you know one thing about you, Miss Crawford, you walk through the fire. You're not afraid. You walk into the fire everywhere you go. And we as a people of God have to be in line with him, in line with ourselves, so that when we see chaos, we can bring peace to it. But we can't get there if we don't walk into it.
Yeah. Wow. You are a true testament to through walking into the fire, through the fire, and out the other side.
And I'm leaving some peace all the way through.
Yeah.
Hey, smile, boy, smile, girl.
Well, that's for sure. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. So, thank you everyone for joining us. If you feel like this message would be helpful to someone that you know, please share it and don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.